Welcome back to GOT. A while back, we did a comparison of the Motorola Razr Fold against the Pixel Fold, 10 Pro Fold, that is. And we did a battle between the two of them, and you can check that video out if you want. A lot of folks afterwards were saying, it's just a shame that they did not put the flagship cameras in the Pro Fold because then it would beat the Motorola. Well, we're going to test that theory by putting it up against the Pixel 10 Pro Fold. No, I'm sorry, the 10 Pro. So this one does have the superior cameras. So let's see how it performs against the Motorola Razr Fold. Let's go. To start with, I wanted to show you where they kind of rank here with the DXOMARK, and that way we got a standard on which we can expect, or we think we can expect when we check these out. So here we are on the DXOMARK site, and you can see this is the smartphone ranking. You can see here that the Motorola actually beats it with a 164 total score versus 163. You can see the scores are really close, okay? Now, overall score 163 versus 164. Now, remember, Pixel has your camera settings, and then they have that thing called Video Boost. And I'm wondering if they rated on Video Boost. We'll compare them side to side, and let's see if the Pixel is better without using Video Boost, because I'm not going to use that because that's not a fair test. We want snap and shoot. So let's go ahead and dive a little deeper in the scores. You can do that by expanding them out, both of them here. On photos, you can see it's interesting that the main camera on the Motorola scores higher, and that is a 50 megapixel versus a 50 megapixel, because the main on the Pixel is a 50 megapixel, and then the other two, the ultra wide and the zoom, are 48 megapixels. That's interesting that the Motorola beats it on the main camera, which is an equal megapixel. And then when we get down here to bokeh, it says that the Pixel does, or the Motorola does better at bokeh. And then when we get to ultra wide, we get better ultra wide on the Motorola. And then when we get down to telephoto, look at that, 141 versus 153. Now, when we scroll down and look at the extra stuff here on the videos, we can see that on video, the Pixel does better, 160, 154, 172 on the main camera does better. On the ultra wide does not, but on the zoom, telephoto does a lot better. That's interesting. It's kind of a trade-off with video and photos, and it's using the same cameras on both. When you use a telephoto, that's their 5 times 48 megapixel zoom. So it stands to reason it should do better, not just on videos, but on photos. Now let's get into the actual battle. So you see I got them both here side by side. You got the Motorola here on the left, and on the right is the Pixel 10 Pro. And you can see there by the labels. If you forget, just look at the labels so you can see. And this is your standard camera. This is your standard one-time shot of the main camera. And they both shoot pretty close to the same. You have 48 megapixel on the Pixel Fold versus, I'm sorry, on the Pixel 10 Pro on the Motorola Razr. It is a 50 megapixel. So just a couple off is the competition, but you can see here they both look very, very compatible. I'm not even going to zoom in on them. They both look really good. So now this next photo is at 3 times zoom on both of them, and you can see they're pretty compatible here. They look very close to the same. Let's go ahead and zoom in on each of these and see how well they take the shot, because now the Motorola again has a 3 times dedicated zoom, where on the Pixel it's actually 5 times. So when you go into 3 times, it's not using the best camera. It's actually cropping in, and you can see that here. You see the boomtown is all blurred here. Everything's pretty much blurred here on the Pixel. And this is the Pixel Pro, all right? But because it has a 5 times zoom, it's not doing quite as well. So we go into the next photo where it's actually 5 times. Now, when you go 5 times, okay, this is probably going to be a little bit better image, in comparison. If you look at that, I think it is quite a bit better than the last one. Is it clearer than the Motorola? Maybe it's because it just looks a little duller to me. The Motorola looks a little brighter, but you can see the Motorola starting to pixel. So the clarity, I would choose the Motorola here, but it's doing a lot clearer because now it's using its 5 times lens. The next one is a dedicated, or not dedicated, but it's 10 times zoom on both of them. Again, you're using a dedicated 5 times zoom here on the Pixel, okay, versus the Motorola here, which is a 3 times zoom. But we're talking 48 megapixels over here on the Pixel versus 50 megapixels on the Motorola. And I think the Motorola looks clear. That's just me. Let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit on this tattoo sign and see what we see here. We can read California. Can we read it here? You can read it here too, but I think my preference is the Motorola. I like what it's doing here with the color and everything. But let's go ahead and go in 20 times on both of them and see what we get. 20 times, now the 5 times is actually kicking in and doing a little better. You can see things are a little clear, but not by much. You know, I think Motorola is hanging in there. And then we go in a little further. We're going to 40 times, I think, or 50 times what this is on both of them. And AI is at work. AI is doing a little better on Motorola, but I think there's more clarity. You know, neither one of them's doing that great at 50. And then I just want to head down to that Boomtown sign here at 100 times just to see how they do. And they're both doing pretty good. I like what the Pixel did here in the sign, but how often do you take a 100 times zoom? Let's go on to the next photo here. So now we're looking at selfies on both of them. Motorola is notorious for having issues with selfies, and I think that they just need to have an update with that phone, and I hope they do it sometime soon because I've been doing all these tests and it's been losing all this selfie stuff simply because it just overexposes. Besides, there's an issue with it. It's only 1080p where you get 4K on the other, so that could be the main reason why it loses the battle. And then we'll just look at one more here where they zoom in just a slight bit. But I will tell you, I was wearing a green shirt, okay? If you look at me now, I'm wearing a gray one, and it looks like I was wearing that gray one that day, but no, it's green. So at least it got the right color. It looks like I didn't use bokeh, or maybe I didn't use portrait on the Pixel. That's my bad. Oh well, but it doesn't matter. On the selfies, the Motorola is horrible. We saw there in the daytime, they're both pretty comparable, compatible, however you want to say it. But I think that Motorola was kind of taking in a lot of those photos, and maybe that's why DXOMARK does rate it better on photos. Let's look at the night shots. Now, this is the same time at night, very, very much the same. The Motorola is showing a little bit more brighter, a little more colorful, I guess. And then let's go ahead and we'll do that zooming again. Here we go. We zoom in. It looks like the Motorola did do better here. It didn't blow out the sign, and you can see the bricks here. What are we doing here on the Pixel? The Pixel, you know, is blowing out the sign, blurring the bricks. So the Pixel, again, it's using a crop instead of actual zoom. So we go into the next photo here. A little bit better here on the Pixel, but still, I think, a bit more clear here on the Motorola. Let's look at this a little closer and see. Yeah, the Motorola, I think, is clear, but it is blurring up here, the bricks, and you can see the pixelating. So both of them do kind of horrible here at night. If you want to see more detail, it looks like the Pixel is holding a little more detail because of that 5 times zoom lens. And then we've got here going in a little more, going in at 10 times. Pretty much the same case here. You've got a little blurring up here in the bricks, but everything's really pixelated really bad here on the Pixel. Got a lot of pixels. Here they just, instead of pixelating, they went to blur. So I would not take photos zooming in at night with either one of those, but the Motorola would zoom in further. It could go up to 50 times. It could actually go up to 100 times if you wanted to do that. So it did not stop it where the Pixel will not allow you to go in any further at night. And I guess because they know that it just won't do any better. So here's another view of downtown here at night, and I'm using the night sight here. You can see on the Pixel now. On the Pixel, on both of them, you have it in your regular standard photo view. They automatically go to night mode when they take the photos, but you can also switch the Pixel to night mode, and it does things a little bit differently than it does in the standard mode. It's weird. I don't quite get that, but they do both automatically sense it's nighttime and switch to that mode. But the Pixel does a little bit better sometimes in night mode, but it's a hit and miss with it. So as you can see here, I've got night on both of them. And again, you got a 50 megapixel here and a 50 megapixel here on the Motorola. And as you can see here, the Motorola is doing a much cleaner job here, I think, at night than the Pixel is. You can see the pixelation here, and it's not, you can't even read it very clear here on the Pixel. Now let's move on to video, because video is where DXOMARK says that the Pixel outranks the Motorola. Okay, here we go. Starting out with daytime video. As you can see, you've got the Pixel on the left and the Motorola on the right. And as you go down the road, I can see that the Motorola is actually clear. And as far as colors, the Motorola is more accurate, although it looks a little dull here. But as you can see, the plant is actually a nice blue. It's not that darker image that you see there. And it's just, I think the color representation is better. That guy was wearing a blue shirt. Okay. So the color representation is a little bit better on the Motorola. Are they both bouncy, or is that just me being bouncy, you know? And then we've got the clarity, I think, is just more on the Motorola in this video. Now, Pixel is supposed to be doing better with video according to the DxOMark, but I'm not seeing it. You know, that car was blue, not black. You know, it's just interesting how more accurate the colors are. And that truck is kind of a blue, not just black, as you can see here. And then we got those little fireflies during the day. That's, you know, sun flares on the lens. Pixel needs to do better with that. I don't understand why they use some cheap glass, I guess, because we got those light flares. And it happens at nighttime too, and we're going to see that here in just a moment. But next, we're going to go ahead and do a daytime video selfie. That way you can hear the audio as well. All right, so here's a selfie on all three, and you can see they're all pretty much the same during the daytime anyway. I can't really tell looking at these screens walking down the sidewalk, but see how they do in and out the light. See how they do with the sky, and how about the audio? How's the audio sound on these phones? Is one clearer than the other? Are they canceling out the audio sound, or are they all pretty much staying the same? You know, not a lot of traffic right now at the moment. Can you hear the birds chirping in the background? Some really loud birds chirping. Not quite sure if you can see that there. I'm gonna go ahead and walk out into the sunlight, see what happens. Walk into traffic. I look both ways first. So this guy wants to stop. Yeah, there we go. Get them going. See how they do here in the sunlight. And then stop and listen to the birds. See how the birds do. Maybe in the sunlight for all of them. Well, as you can see there during the daylight, yes, the Pixel had a better picture, I think, on the selfie. You could tell it was 4K versus 1080p. And of course, the Motorola had a lot of flaring, okay, overexposing that sun. They can work on that. I know they can fix that in software, but I could tell you that the Motorola, it was accurate in color. I was wearing that green shirt, not this gray one. So it should have been green, not gray. The Pixel shows it as gray. Now let's go ahead and go into a nighttime video here on their main cameras. Now you can see at nighttime, it looks, I don't know, a little hazy on the Pixel, not quite as clear, I think, and crisp as you have on the Motorola. Motorola is looking very clear on everything. And I think the Pixel is actually washboarding, and there's your little fireflies already starting. That was a really bad one. You know, Pixel's got to fix that. It's crazy. Now, from some time to time, it looks clear, but you can see it's blowing out that light. It's doing a lot of washboarding. Not that the Motorola doesn't do that, because the Motorola struggles at times and has trouble focusing when the light changes and everything. Now, I don't know how often you walk at night and film. I think most of the time you stand still. But you can see they both do a little bit of washboarding and blurring when you're strolling at night anyway. But those fireflies just drive me nuts on the Pixel. And then you have much more color accuracy and clarity. You see that building there at night with the Motorola versus the Pixel. The Pixel, again, doesn't quite match up the color as well. So let's go ahead and a nighttime selfie, and we'll see how they differ here. Here's all three in selfie mode here at night, walking down the same sidewalk. And you see it's kind of dark and light out. Of course, the Motorola is really dark. You can't see it at all.
You know, it's because it's doing 1080p where the other two are doing 4K. See, it's pretty poor.
Well, there you go. I hope I answered the question for you. If you put the Pro cameras, the real flagship cameras, in the Pixel Fold Pro, would it do better or would it beat the Motorola? In my view, no, the Motorola still wins because it beats the Pixel Pro, I think. And there's also another thing to think about is they're coming out with the 11 version soon. And from what I understand, they're using the exact same cameras in the Fold this next year. We don't really know what they're doing with the Pixel Pro just yet, but mostly they're just adding some cosmetic changes where you won't have the silver here. It's all going to be black, and they're having adding some special light that'll glow and do different things. I mean, silly stuff like that. So now that there's another competitor in the market with the Motorola, is the Pixel Fold really going to make it? Is it going to last? I say no, because I'll tell you what, now that you have a second one, 7 years of warranty, 7 years of updates, but the biggest difference is we know you get the updates with the Pixel. The Pixel will be the first one to get the next version, to get all the updates, get the security patches. So if that's your big concern, yes, go with the Pixel because there's no issues there. Motorola is guaranteeing all that, but we know that their track record has been very slow with updates. So hopefully they'll improve it now that the sales are going really big on their Fold. And I'm just so glad that there's another competitor here in the US. Now it's time to hear from you. What do you think? Did you get your answer that you might have had? Will the Pixel Fold do better with flagship cameras in it? It could, but we're never going to know, are we? And more importantly, do you think that the Motorola held its own against the actual Pro cameras in the Pixel? Let me know what you think down in the comments. And if you have both phones and tested them, I want to hear what your results were between the two. Now, if you haven't seen that full video on comparing these two, go ahead and check that out here. Now, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, now's a great time so you don't miss out on more content, because there's more content to come every time they come out with new phones. And we're going to start seeing wide foldables in the market here shortly. Until next time, thank you for watching, and God bless.